Greetings. I'm David Kennedy Bird, the rector at Foundations Collegium. Foundations Collegium is a program of study that has proven notoriously difficult to explain to people. You know how you're supposed to have your elevator speech prepared? Are you familiar with this? If you're a professional, you're supposed to be able to explain to people what you do in the amount of time that it takes you and someone else to get on an elevator and the doors close and you go up a couple of floors and you get off. You're supposed to be able to, help them understand what you do for a living in that amount of time. I can't do that. I've never been able to do that. It's awful. And there are several reasons for this. During the next 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes, hopefully we can get to the bottom of what it is about my program that is so hard to explain. But I expect it to be notoriously difficult. It always has been in the past. Problem number one, the unusual setting in which teaching occurs. We meet in a living room. Final exams are held in a kitchen. The final exams are one-on-one. It's individual exam appointments. The student has 2 or 3 hours to explain to me everything that he or she learned during the semester. They're great. It's a great assessment tool. And it's very relaxed. The whole thing is relaxed. It's a fun program. The students enjoy each other. We all enjoy each other. There's a lot of laughter. We indulge in philosophical nerd humor. If you don't want your kids to become adept at philosophical nerd humor, keep them away from this program. But that's a little bit unusual. People aren't used to a program that's so relaxed. I mean, we sit around on living room furniture. We don't sit in desks with the wooden surface and green painted cinder block walls, and there's a hallway with lockers lining it. Man, nothing like that. The unusual structure of the curriculum is another problem. I don't think it's a problem. I think it's an asset. Foundations Collegium is set up in such a way that the student experiences the unity of all knowledge. When we're studying literature or philosophy, theology, the scriptures of the Old and New Testament, the arts, critical thinking, all of it, it all ties in together. It does. I mean, in the real world, everything ties in together, and that's how my students learn to experience knowledge. But people aren't accustomed to that, and it can be difficult to explain. Another thing, there are so many unfamiliar emphases and subject areas and odd terminology that I employ in this program. I'm not ashamed of that, but it can make things a little bit sketchy to help people understand what's actually going on. I talk about worldview studies and cosmography, and I say that we investigate epistemology and ontology and metaphysics and axiology, and people are going, what? I say, and we study paradigm management, and someone will say, paradigm management? When I was in school, we didn't study nothing called paradigm management. I understand that, sir. I didn't either. I made the term up. So, this can create roadblocks. I have chosen the terms that I use in characterizing the program very carefully. I don't just make up weird stuff for the sake of being strange. For instance, we don't study something called English at Foundations Collegium. I think English, as it has been conventionally understood over the past century or so, actually doesn't make sense as an academic discipline. Instead, we study language and grammar and composition over here, learning to use language in communicating clearly. And then we study the history of literature over here, which is actually a completely different thing. But people aren't accustomed to that. The emphases, the fact that God is front and center, the kingdom of God is central to what we're doing. Worldview studies, discipleship, leadership, these are the things that are at the center of what we're doing. And people aren't accustomed to that. People are used to the boxes. We study this box, and this box, and this box, and this box. Well, reality isn't divided up into boxes. You do have to report credits for your transcript, and there are ways of doing that. There are ways of managing that. But the way we address reality makes sense in terms of the way God has actually structured reality. Finally, Big problem, the unusual demands that I make on students. There's a book that came out a few years ago. Maybe you've heard of this book. It's called Do Hard Things by Alex Harris and Brett Harris. If you have not read this book with your kids, stop watching the video right now. I'm not as interesting as these guys are who wrote the book. Run down to your Christian bookstore, pick up a copy of Do Hard Things, bring it home, sit down, read it out loud with your kids. They will be challenged. I think they will really enjoy it. Then watch the rest of the video. Basically, the premise, and these guys wrote it when they were still fairly young. They're well into their 20s by now, but I think they were in their late teens when they wrote the book. And the premise is that teenagers are not stupid. This whole idea that teenagers are not really able to do anything, they're just kind of dull, and they've got their hair hanging over their eyes, and they shoot up drugs and listen to rock music all day, and you ask them a question and they grunt instead of giving you a grammatically complete answer. There's no reason for any of that. There's nothing wrong with teenagers. They just need to be challenged. There need to be expectations placed on them, and they will rise to the challenge. And that's what happens in my program. It is not easy. It is a hard program. The volume of reading that is required is a little bit more than some people are accustomed to. The quality of the reading that's required, the complexity of the ideas that we encounter, the sophistication of understanding that I expect of them as they approach the stuff that we're studying. Even average students are capable of doing amazing stuff if they know that that is what is being required of them. Okay, so that's the end of my elevator speech. We went from the basement to the top floor of the Empire State Building and then back down, and we did that a couple of times, but at least I finished the elevator speech. And it wasn't so rough. If I could get people in the real world to sit still for that whole speech the way you have, and by the way, thank you very much, then this program would not be so notoriously difficult to explain to people. We'll see how it works out. Thank you.